All right, so I checked the Bible and there's one thing missing from it: your opinion. And I know that might sound harsh, but if you're a Christian, your calling is never comfort, is never hiding away in your opinions. It's seeking and pursuing and speaking out truth. And what is truth? Jesus says in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So if he's truth, then his word is truth. And what is his word? The Bible. And truth does not bend to our emotions or our opinions. Instead, it transforms them to align our hearts with his. Hi, I'm Delaney O'Keefe, the host of the First Faith podcast. And today we're talking about something that most people, especially if you're a Christian, try to avoid, which is standing on truth, even when it's uncomfortable, unpopular, or even offensive. In fact, saying no when it's rooted in truth and principle can actually be loving. But other times, speaking up boldly for truth can transform someone's life from being a sinner to being saved. So the question that we're building towards today is this: how many people could God use you watching this, you to save if you weren't afraid to stand for truth, even if it felt offensive to somebody else? We live in a culture where feelings are treated like facts, but they're not. Feelings change, but the truth never does. And the truth is the Bible. As Christians, we are called to make disciples of all nations. And what does that look like? That requires knowing truth, standing on truth, and speaking truth, not your opinion. So how do you do that? First, you get in your word by yourself. You acknowledge that you need time spent alone with God to know who God is so you can develop a personal relationship with God. Because I hear so many people say, I'm a Christian, I'd love to tell people about Jesus, but I don't know about the Bible. Well, first of all, it's not really about knowing the facts of the Bible. It's about sharing your personal testimony and how Jesus took you from being a sinner to being saved and gave you freedom through his death and resurrection. They will see the light in you that's different. They will find freedom in Jesus when they see that something is different in you. So don't worry about the facts of the Bible. You have to separate yourself. You have to dive deep in a personal relationship with the Lord, because you can read the Bible and never be a Christian. You can go to church and never be a Christian. You can sing worship songs and never be a Christian, because a Christian is somebody who has put their faith in Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior and has constantly and continuously denies themselves, follows Jesus by picking up their cross, picking up their burdens, actively denying and dying to their old self, their flesh, and giving their life constantly over in the daily battle to follow Jesus. That is what a Christian is. Get a personal relationship with Jesus. That's what sets Jesus apart from every other God. A personal relationship. Muhammad's dead. Joseph Smith is dead. Buddha is dead. Gandhi is dead. These people are dead. But God, not only is God good, he's sovereign and he's alive. He is not in a tomb. Go look for Jesus's body. It's not in a tomb. I can promise you that. Jesus's body is not in a tomb, but you can sure as heck find Muhammad. You can sure as heck find Buddha. Can sure as heck find Gandhi. You can find Joseph Smith. They're all in tombs. But Jesus Christ is alive. So that's the first thing you do. When you want to discover truth, when you want to know truth, when you want to dive deep into what is true, so you are no longer speaking from an opinion, but from a truthful standpoint of the Bible, of the word, is a first step, getting to know Jesus, inviting him in to have a personal relationship with you. He's already there. He's knocking on your door. He wants you just to open it and accept him and then dive deep into that relationship. But then you need guidance. You need wisdom. You need education. Just like you go to school to learn, just like you go to work and there's somebody above you that teaches you how to do certain things, so is church, okay? Church is not meant to fill your soul, but it's helped to guide you in theology. What fills your soul with Jesus is your personal relationship with Jesus. What makes you free is denying yourself, and that comes from an intimate personal relationship with Jesus of what you need to deny yourself from. Church is a beautiful, wonderful thing that is used for community, that is used for uplifting other believers, that is helping you find community, people who can go through life with you, and also educating you on theology and things that maybe you don't understand because you didn't go to theology school, and the Bible is difficult to read. And ChatGPT don't have all the answers, okay? It's kind of that simple. It really is that simple. But when you go out into the world and when you speak on truth and principle, You speak from experience. Because if I told you how great Disneyland was and I'd never been to Disneyland, you'd call me a liar. You're like, what do you know about Disneyland? And I told you, I love the Indiana Jones ride because it's so fun and there's all these twists and turns and all of these things. And you'd be like, but bruh, you never even went on that ride. How do you know? Like, you watched a YouTube video. Great. I'm so glad you watched a YouTube video. But it's not the same as sitting in the ride at Indiana Jones, going through it and getting off and being like, let's do it again. I love Disneyland. There's a joy and a glow that comes from you after you leave the park from Disneyland. You want everybody else to know how great experience you had with Disneyland. You post on Instagram that you went to Disneyland. You tell your family that you went to Disneyland and you had the best time, and the Indiana Jones ride was your favorite ride. And it was so fun because of your personal experience, not because you knew how the mechanics worked of the ride, right? You have no idea how the mechanics work of the ride. And nobody's questioning you on, hey, how did they make that ride work? Or what are the mechanics of it? What are the dimensions of the cart that you're sitting in? What are the dimensions of Indiana Jones' height on the screen? No one's asking you those details. And so many of you are bogged down by telling people about Jesus because you're worried about the details that you have no idea about. You say, oh, I can't talk about Jesus because I don't know the Bible that well. Well, you know what? You do have your personal testimony. And just like you went to Disneyland, you should be able to tell people about the good news of Jesus because of what he did for you. You're not watching Jesus on a YouTube format. Maybe you're watching The Chosen and you're like, wow, that guy's cool. But guess what? He wants a personal relationship with you. He wants to change your life. Daily, you should feel that joy of going to Disneyland with Jesus Christ. Because Jesus is better than Disneyland. I promise you that. Because at the end of the day at Disneyland, not only do your feet hurt and you're broke, but you don't know when you're going to ever return because it's so expensive. But you can go to Jesus Christ and get that same buzz, that same feeling of joy in the presence of Jesus, and your feet will never hurt. Instead, you can take off your shoes. You can stand barefoot on the ground and say, here is holy. You can declare, here is holy, just like Moses did in Exodus. Because you're standing in the presence of the Almighty God who wants a personal relationship with you. And that is how you start to speak truth. You gain a personal relationship with Jesus. Then you go to church and you find community. You can do them simultaneously, absolutely. But once you do those two things, you have a personal relationship, you find a church for community and for education. Then you go out into the world and you can speak. And you speak not your opinion, not what feels right. You speak truth from your understanding of your personal relationship with Jesus and the theology that you're learning at church. And here's the thing. Truth can feel offensive. I get it, and it sucks. And there's going to be times when you're not brave and faithful to the word of making disciples of all nations because it's more comfortable to hide in the background. It's more comfortable to say, yeah, I don't really get involved with politics. Yeah, I don't really get involved with pop culture. I'm just gonna, God knows my heart. Did you know being offensive doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong? It often means that you're just challenging somebody to see things differently. And if you base your life on God's word, then you don't get to stay silent when truth matters because silence isn't neutral. It can cost people everything. Think about it. Your silence can cost bloodlines of generations, generation after generation from knowing God. If only you opened your mouth, if only you spoke from your true testimony of how Jesus saved your life, who transformed your life, maybe you could help transform somebody else. You can make a disciple of all nations, and then they can make a disciple and a disciple and a disciple, and we can all have a big, huge party in heaven and ride the roller coasters in heaven. And today we're going to take a look at Queen Vashti and Queen Esther in the book of Esther in the Old Testament. We're going to see how both of them set boundaries for themselves and how both of them help bloodlines and generations of people come to know God. For context, the book of Esther is set in the Persian Empire during the reign of King Xerxes I, and it recounts how a Jewish woman named Esther became queen and helped prevent the annihilation of the Jewish people after a royal decree orchestrated by the king's royal official. Through political courage and strategic intervention, Esther and her cousin Mordecai, who raises her, exposes this plot, leading the Jews to deliverance and the establishment of the festival of Purim. Esther 1 starts off with the king throwing a huge celebration, months long, days long, weeks long, and he's drunk. He's just blatantly drunk the whole time, essentially. And he calls his queen, at the time it was Queen Vashti, to him to wear her crown, her royal robes, so he can basically parade her around in front of all of these men while they're all drinking and drunk. And Vashti had the courage to say no. She set a boundary even when it meant losing her position, and she wasn't concerned with pleasing people. She stood on principle and in truth. And this is important because saying no to something doesn't mean that you're wrong. And I want to encourage you in a world that's going to tell you that certain things are true. Zodiac signs, new age witchcraft, tarot cards, homosexuality, going to the clubs, drinking, partying, marijuana, all of these things are true in our culture, right? But the Bible says something different, and it's okay to say no, even if it might offend somebody else. Saying no to certain things, especially the things that are not of God, will always be more important than saying yes and succumbing to the world, because we are called as Christians to be set apart, to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And it does not mean we have to say no in a mean way. It does not mean that we say no in a disrespectful way, but it does mean that we set boundaries for ourselves. And when somebody asks us to cross those boundaries, we politely decline. Vashti politely declined the king. She did not appear to his royal summoning, and it protected her. It really did. It protected her from who knows what in the moments of drunkenness that the king and his friends were in. Because she didn't, God provided a way for Esther to come in and save the people. So continuing on with some history and some backstory of this, Queen Vashti says no to the king. The king and all of his drunk friends are like, she needs to be fired. Hashtag canceled. So he makes a royal decree that she's gone. She gets out of the sight, and all of these young women are going to be paraded in front of him after a year of special treatment. And what they have to do with the king isn't explicitly discussed, but it is said that they spent one night with the king and either were sent away in the morning or not. So I'll let you jump to conclusions there. It was a terrible situation to be in, and Esther, being this beautiful young Jewish woman who was keeping her identity a secret, is brought to the king. And she does a terrible thing. She has to do this thing because she's being summoned to the king. It reminds me of the Bible verse, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. She gave her respect to the king Xerxes at the time, but she always kept her faith in God and believed that God would restore her. And God does. Royal decree had been formed to kill and eradicate the Jews. And she knew she needed to do something because this is the moment that she was created for. And so she went to the king. Usually at this time, you are not supposed to go up to the king. The king summons you, and she went to the king bravely. She stepped in braveness and faithfulness to God and to her people. And she approached the king uninvited, risking her life, but she did it with wisdom, humility, and love. So we see two sides of this and how we can apply this to our lives today. First, we must again be foundationally sound on truth. That is seeking a personal relationship with Jesus. So we have our personal testimony to give and to share with the world. Then we gain knowledge and community through church, and then we're able to speak. And sometimes speaking looks like listening or not speaking or setting up boundaries and saying no. Like Queen Vashti did. She knew her boundaries and she said no, but she did it with wisdom, humility, and respect. Same thing with Esther. Could you imagine what would happen if Esther just ran into the throne room and said, King Xerxes, my people, my people? He'd be like, okay, first of all, you disrespected me. Second of all, absolutely not because you disrespected me. And third of all, now I'm going to kill you too. People don't take well to just judgment and harsh condemnation. You need to approach things strategically with wisdom, humility, and love. You can say no, you can set boundaries and say no, but you can also stand up and speak up with truth. Esther went to her friends and her community, her Jewish people, and said, pray for me, fast for me for 3 days. That is why you have church, so they can keep you accountable, so they can pour into you theological knowledge, but also keep you accountable in your sins, in your quest, in your prayers. It's not about your opinion. It even says first Esther told her cousin, no, I'm not going to do this. Mordecai says to her, perhaps this is the moment for which you were created. And you listening to this today, perhaps this is the moment for which you were created. I know this is the moment for which you were created. You were created in this generation with social media, with technology, in the world that you live in the environment, in the community that you're in, for a reason. If you've never prayed for or with your neighbors, then ask yourself, why not? Pray for your neighbors. God didn't put you on that block by accident. Pray for your family. Esther came to the king, and the king already respected and loved Esther because of their relationship, because he spent time with her. When I was reading this story, I thought to myself, I wonder if the king would even care if he wasn't married to Esther. And the answer is probably not. If Esther was just some woman who had appeared in front of him without having a personal relationship with him, and said, "You're killing my people," he would say, "Too bad, so sad. Sorry, I probably don't care." But it's because he knew Esther, knew that she was a good person, knew Mordecai, her cousin, knew that he was a good person. The king had a change of heart. So where in your life, who in your life do you have a personal relationship with that you're able to share Jesus with, share your testimony with, and then bring them to church to grow in community? Everybody wants to post on social media, but nobody wants to go into the nations and pray for their neighbor. It is more important to pray for your neighbor than it is to post on social media. And I say that as somebody who posts on social media. Everybody has authority to make disciples of all nations. That is our call as Christians. Not everybody should, and not everybody is called to posting on social media. Not everybody is called to have a microphone in their hands. Not everybody is called to teach other people, because that is a very high standard that God will be judging the teachers on. Don't be afraid to share your testimony of the truth, your testimony of what you learn from the Bible, not your opinion. Set boundaries, speak up, be brave and faithful. I am calling somebody out there today to be brave and to be faithful to the truth of the Lord, not to your opinion. Because there is only one way, there is only one truth, and there is only one life, and that is Jesus Christ, because his tomb is empty. Going back to the story of these two queens, one showed us that saying no can be righteous, and the other showed us that speaking up can be life-saving. The truth is not one-dimensional, but it always requires bravery and faithfulness. So why are you staying silent? Why are you staying silent? If we are told to make disciples of all nations, why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Let's be honest, many Christians stayed quiet today because they're afraid of offending people, they're afraid of rejection, they're afraid of being labeled or losing influence. But honestly, here's the reality. When you prioritize being liked over being truthful, you stop being effective. We also see people walking away from the church because they're offended. But God is not the church. God is not flawed people. God is perfect. He is truth. God is perfect and his truth is perfect. And the church is a place meant for community, for growth, for education. But your relationship with God has to be built on his word and his truth, not people's behavior. And his word isn't a list of rules meant to restrict you. It's a set of boundaries meant to set you free. Think of it like this. You put a little kid in a field and they have free reign to go wherever they want. Okay, they have free reign to go wherever they want. There's no fence around them. They can just run rampant, run free. Okay, but there's a lake over there. There's a lake over there, and the kid, if he gets in the lake, he could drown. And there's a beehive over there, and if the kid goes and climbs the tree, he could get stung by the bee, and he could swell up and be allergic to bees. This is a very dramatic analogy, I know. But now imagine if there was a boundary, a fence, that kept the kid in where it was safe. Now the kid cannot go out and fall into the lake. Now the kid cannot climb the tree that has the beehive. And he might not understand it because the lake looks blue and shiny and sparkly. And the tree looks so fun to climb, but he doesn't see the beehive. That is the same thing with God. Everyone's like, oh, he's just a list of rules. And it's not, no, you're allowed to break the rules. You're allowed to hop over the fence and go and fall into the lake. Absolutely. And I promise you, God will be there when you fall in. He will pull you out. But how great would it be if you stayed within the boundaries and you were protected and satisfied and had everything you need? That is what God's doing in your life. That is why God has boundaries. It's so that you don't fall into the lake. It's so you don't get stung by the beehive that you cannot see. But even if you do climb over the fence, fall into the lake, or get stung by the bee, God is there to pick you up, dry you off, and to bandage up those bee stings. Sin can feel fun. Jumping into the lake can feel fun on a hot day, but when you don't know how to swim, when you were never taught how to swim in the lake, you will drown. And it's the same thing with God. You hop over that, you jump into the sin of homosexuality, you jump into the sin of alcoholism, You jump into the sin of sex before marriage. It can feel fun. It can feel exciting. It can feel temporarily satisfying, but that's not what the lake was meant for. Come back to Jesus. Find your way to the shore. Let Jesus dry you off and walk you back to the boundary line. You are not too far gone for the Lord. There is nothing that you can do that will ever separate you from the love of God. I should know. I'm a sinner. I have jumped into the lake so many times, because every time God puts me back into the boundary zone, I see that lake and I just jump right for it. So the boundaries that you hate, the painted plain white wall that surrounds this encounter that is God's boundaries, they may look boring, they may look restricting, but they are the ones that free you because they keep you safe. They keep you in proximity with God. They keep your soul restored, redeemed, and it keeps you on the path of being set free. And when you find yourself wanting to jump over that fence, to jump into the lake on a hot day, deny yourself, pick up that cross and throw it to the feet of Jesus and say, Jesus, I need you. And there is freedom there, I promise. I promise. Now, a lot of you guys have been hurt by the church and you feel offended by the church and you've had terrible experience with people in the church. I want to encourage you that people are not God. That is why it's so important to have a personal relationship with Jesus. Jesus is not the fallible people that just go to church on Sundays. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and he is asking for a personal relationship with you. So when people fail you, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when humans fail you, when I fail you, when your favorite preacher fails you, when your friends fail you, when your community fails you, you have your foundation, which is your personal relationship with Jesus. And you can fall back to him and say, Jesus, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And forgive me, help me get through this situation. I'm going to tell you a very personal story about myself, because you can sit here and say, well, Delaney, what do you know? What do you know about church hurt? You've grown up in the church your whole life. Exactly. I've grown up in the church my whole life. So I've got plenty of church hurt to share. So let me tell you about it. Okay, I'm going to share my personal testimony about church hurt, because I think a lot of you can say, oh, but you don't know my personal story. Oh, you don't know this, or oh, you don't know that about me or this person or what they did. And I can promise you I can empathize. When I was a senior in high school, I went to this new church and I loved it. I had transferred a bunch in high school. It was a really traumatic experience for me, and I felt safe at church. In fact, I felt loved, I felt seen, I felt valued at church, which is great. That's what church is supposed to be for. I joined the leadership team, I joined the media team, and I joined the worship team. And I just loved being there, just enjoying life there. And as the school year progressed and as my time continued to progress and spending all this time at the church, the worship pastor went from texting me, oh, you're going to be on the schedule this week, to, oh, what are you doing this weekend? To, what's your Snapchat? To, what's your Instagram? To, I'm going to a pumpkin patch. Would you like to come with me? I was 17. This man was 27. He was a position of power in the church, a church that I loved, a church where I didn't want to be a problem. I didn't want to be a problem because I had transferred so many times. I was like, I can't be a problem again. So I ignored him as best as I could, but also was trying to be nice. And it got bad. He never touched me inappropriately, thank the good Lord. But I was extremely uncomfortable, and I was his prey. He would say things like, oh, are you cold? Do you want to come with me to my car to get a jacket? It was just so scary. And I wanted to be on the worship team so badly. I wanted to sing. And this man was pouring into me saying how great of a singer I was. And I know I'm not. I'm not a great singer, but I love to do it. So I took the compliment and I was like, wow, he really thinks so. Somebody believes in me. Somebody sees me. But I was his prey. I was being groomed, and it got bad. It got really bad. I would get FaceTime calls. I would get phone calls. When he would text me and I didn't respond, he would call me and say, respond to my text. He would Snapchat me. He would DM me. He would send me reels on Instagram, whatever it'd be. And I tried my best to be polite, but ignore him, because I didn't want somebody to look at me and say that I was wrong, that I was the problem. And I'll never forget how God intervened. Because I didn't want anything bad to happen. I didn't want anything bad to happen. Nobody knew. I didn't tell anybody how uncomfortable I was. And I at the time had my Snapchat notifications on and was at school, and I had put my phone down, and somebody who happened to go to my church as well as my school looked at my phone and saw that he had Snapchatted me. And he said, "Why is he Snapchatting you?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "But please don't tell anybody. I don't want him to get in trouble." And he said, "Okay, I promise." Dirty little liar he was, because he went and told. But thank God he did. Thank God he did. Because I wasn't the only person that he was grooming. I wasn't the only person that was his prey. Both girls and boys were involved, and it led to him being fired. And I'm so grateful that it wasn't worse than what it was. But it still was really, really painful. It still was really hard. And it still is embarrassing to talk about for some reason, like it's my fault, and when I know it's not my fault. So you say you have church hurt, and I get it. I couldn't listen to worship music for months. Worship music. Because he was the worship pastor. I'd sit out when I would go to church. I'd sit out of worship music because I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take the sound. I couldn't take the music. I stopped listening in my car to worship music. I couldn't do it. I had such bad anxiety. I was throwing up. Like, I was heaving in the bathroom one day during worship because I just couldn't take the sound. I couldn't take the noise. I'm dry heaving. I'm crying. I'm like in pain. Worship music made me feel pain because I equated it to him. And one of the leaders came in and she just sat there with me on the floor. She just prayed for me. And still to this day, that man has ruined my relationship with male authority figures. One of my favorite teachers in high school at the time was my surf coach and my history teacher. And I had a good relationship with him because I had him for like 2 periods a day, you know? And because of what this worship pastor did to me, I never wanted to touch him. I never wanted to see him. I didn't want to be in his classroom because I'm like, what if he's doing the same thing? And I still struggle sometimes today, you know, with teachers or at work. If there's somebody ahead of me that's a male, I still have fear, but it didn't stop me from going to church because I had my personal relationship with Jesus, and I knew that what this man did to me, what this worship pastor did to me, how he was grooming me was not a reflection of Jesus Christ. It was a reflection of our fall. It was a reflection of sin. It has nothing to do with Jesus. So if you've been hurt by the church, no, it has nothing to do with Jesus. In fact, it's Jesus that redeems me. It's Jesus who holds on to me and says that there is freedom for that pain. It says that the pain you are feeling cannot compare to the joy that's coming. Romans 8:18. And I used to think that verse meant heavenly. I used to think that the joy was heavenly, would come when I reached heaven, but it comes in the morning. When I give my life to Jesus, when I give my pain to him, when I sacrifice it all at his feet, I say, this is yours, God. It's not my burden to bear. When I can learn to forgive the people who have done me wrong. So I forgive that worship pastor. Hear me say, I hold no bitterness. I hold no resentment. I release him from my heart because Jesus released me, because Jesus forgave me. So the first step in overcoming this pain is forgiving the person who caused it. And that comes from a relationship with Jesus and understanding my value. Jesus does not look at sin and say one is greater than the other, for it is all sin. It all keeps us separate from God. And yes, I still cry when I think about it, and it still hurts me, and there are still things that I have to deal with and navigate and go to therapy for, absolutely. But what a beautiful thing that I can learn from these mistakes. What a beautiful thing that this will never happen to me again because now I'm wise. What a beautiful thing that this story hopefully can touch somebody else for God's kingdom and say that there is freedom. This bitterness, this pain, this resentment you're holding towards somebody, let it go because Jesus lets all of that go and he looks at you and says, you are forgiven. You are loved. You are redeemed. And the pain that you are feeling cannot compare to the joy that's coming in the morning. In the morning when you lay at the feet of Jesus and say, help me. Forgive me. Save me from this pain. It's a long process. It's not going to happen in a split second. This has taken therapy. This has taken just constantly going back to the altar and giving God this pain. It's constant. But there is joy, there is freedom, and now I get to share that with you. Get in your word. Understand why you believe in Jesus Christ. Have a personal testimony to share with people. And don't be afraid to offend people. Don't be afraid to have boundaries and say, no, that's not of God. I'm sorry, I will not participate. But I love you and I respect you. I hope you can respect me. Grow in community, grow in relationships with the people around you who are not Christians. So when the time is right, you can share with them your testimony. You can help save generations to come like Esther did, just by being in a personal relationship with somebody who doesn't know Jesus. And at the right time, in the right way, with love and kindness, you can minister the good news of Jesus Christ to them. So if this episode challenged you, I kindly ask that you share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Ask yourself, where am I choosing comfort over truth? And step out bravely and faithfully to the truth of the Bible. Not your truth, not your opinion, the truth of the Bible. Because somebody's eternity might be on the other side of it. I also want to mention that here at First Faith, we are completely 100% self-funded. So if you like the mission, you like these podcast episodes, you like our social media, please feel free to reach out to me with any ideas or sponsorships that you guys might have. I'd love to partner with anybody who mission aligns with the mission of our company. To learn more about the mission of our company, you can go to firstfaithmedia.com. You can also find us on TikTok and Instagram at First Faith Media. You can find my personal Instagram and TikTok at Delaney.O'Keefe. I am so grateful that you guys listen all the way through. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please remember to be brave and faithful even in the small things. And know that the Lord Jesus Christ loves you and his tomb is empty so that you may have freedom. And I pray all of these things over your name, over your life, over your mission. And I send you out into the world to go make disciples of all nations. And I hope you enjoy this episode. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.